So in 2017, I built this hydraulic lift table here behind me. Little did I know that it was actually going to turn into a YouTube channel where I'd be consistently sharing videos on how to build motorcycles. But since then, I've had questions about this thing, and I'd like to just go through some of those questions, answer them, as well as maybe give you whether you should buy one or build one for yourself, and also the things that I'll maybe change if I was to build another one. So let's get into it. So this here was probably one of the #1 questions I got a lot of. Why the heck would you go to that much effort to make one when you can just go and purchase one from a store? And I guess the simple answer is, I just wanted to challenge myself, and I already had the materials. So cost and fun were the two major reasons I did it. And it was like 3 years ago, or even longer than that now. And I just wanted to try it and give it a go and see if I could make it work. And would I build the exact same thing again? And the answer is kind of yes and also no, and I'll explain what I mean. So the overall design works and I'm happy with it, but there's probably 3 things that I would like to change on this if I was to do another one, or I could even make the changes to this one. First one is completely out of my control. It's actually the ATV lift. The ram has now pretty much, it won't go to full extension. It gets really close, but it just doesn't quite get there, which means I can't put the bike up at the highest point and have it sitting on that stop there, which is a bit unfortunate. I can get it there, I just got to manually lift it. And the main reason for that is probably because I've always got it under tension. Probably should take it off tension and put it on the stopper at all times, which I don't. And there's a lot of weight hanging over the back, which brings me to the next thing. I never ever let this thing down with my foot. That's the foot pedal to let it down, but I never do that because there's so much weight when the engine's in the bike, it just drops real quick. So you got to let it down really slowly with your hand, and then it just gradually goes down. That's, I guess, just the design of how it's sitting and how you've got this ram system down here and all the weight is over the back. And the other thing is the ramp. I guess the ramp works perfectly, but you got to get it in that perfect little spot each time as this thing's coming down. You can imagine, comes down, it's just got to get in that right spot for it to locate in here. Which works, you got to do it, you just got to go backwards and forwards to get it right. But I would probably do a different ramp and have a ramp that's, I guess, attached, maybe a 2-part ramp that folds. So when you actually lower this down, you can pull the ramp out and it folds out like that. And that's probably something that I would do as well. So 3 more things you could do to potentially make this better is welding in a bit of tube like this as a sleeve everywhere where you have a bolt, and that would make it a lot stronger. And if you plan on using this thing for work and going up and down multiple times during the day, it's definitely the smarter way of doing it. But if you just use it at home, just drill a hole, put a bolt through. As long as you've got a thick wall pipe that you're using, or frame that you're using, it's going to last forever. It's not going to wear out. So that's one thing you could do. The next thing, which is a huge thing, which is something that I'll probably do, is putting swivel wheels at both ends. I've got fixed straight wheels at the back, swivels at the front, but I wish I had them at both ends because it would be a lot easier to spin this thing around the garage if they were both swivels. But then you've got to try and figure out how to lock it down because you don't really want the thing moving where you're working on it. So just something to keep in mind. And another thing that you could do, I won't do this, but you could do this to make it smoother on the motion down, which is putting the ATV lift in the center so the weight is distributed evenly. It just means that your foot pedals and everything will be on one side of the lift. So you'd have to work it from one side. You could do it, you could figure it out, but that's just another thing you could do. So what I'll do now is just rapidly go through a bunch of the questions that I've had. The most common ones are, what is the total cost? Total cost was $200, and that was because I already had the steel. And the next question was, what was the steel size? It was 75 millimeters by 25 millimeters by 3 mil wall thickness. Can you make it out of wood? Yes, you can. Just be mindful that you're gonna have to beef up the size of the wood. I would probably go something like hardwood if you can. And if you're gonna go pine, make sure you go structural pine, make sure there's hardly any knots in it. That's my advice to you if you're gonna build it out of timber. What is the total height that it's used at the most? I would probably say about 500 to 700 millimeters off the ground. That is pretty much a really good height to have it at, and you don't have to bend down that much. And if you're just doing servicing and things like that, you can easily ramp up to that as well. So if it's gonna be solid and you don't need to do a hydraulic one, that's probably a really good height. Anything I would change? Yep, I've mentioned that earlier. What is the kind of jack that I used? It's an ATV lift. Do you always weld in shorts? Yeah, I do weld in shorts quite often actually. Probably shouldn't, but I do. because it's really hot here, and the only time I really wear pants is when I'm going out or if it's winter time. List of tools that I used to build it was pretty much the last question. A drill, welder, drop saw, angle grinder, and a circular saw just to cut the top that goes on top. You can use a hand saw if you want, but I used a circular saw, I think, from memory. So if I wasn't to build another one and I was to purchase one, this is the guy that I would get, straight off the shelf. And a few of the things I really like about it: first up, it's got a really wide top platform, super handy for putting all your tools and bits and pieces on. Trust me, that's handier than you can possibly imagine when you've got multiple tools out. It is scissor action, so therefore this motion should be a lot smoother in the descent than mine, from what I've learned. It's also got this frame around the bottom. This frame here gives it a lot more weight really low, so therefore if you put it in the full extension, it's going to have extra weight down here to sort of give it stability, plus these little legs that come out, and you can pretty much use the foot here as well. It has a foot pedal, so I mean, we're not lazy anyway because we're building a bike, so therefore, you know, pumping this thing up with your foot is not really that hard. Unless you're going to be using this for work, you really don't need pneumatic or the electric ones. I mean, they're handy and it's nice to have, but it's extra money that you don't really need to spend. Alternatively, you can get something like this, which has a skinnier top platform. So you'd couple this with a side table on wheels so you could put your tools and bits and pieces on. Otherwise, you would fill this little section up quite fast, I could imagine, with tools. This one is pneumatic, so you can actually plug this into your air and have this thing going up and down quite fast. Having it narrower is probably handy if you're going to put a few of these into a garage or a workshop, so therefore you can have a few more lined up and working on a few bikes at the same time. So in answering that question of would I build another one, and the answer is yes, I would love to have a go at building another one, but the design would be a little bit different. Let me show you what I mean. So mimicking that same scissor lift design that you can already purchase from the shops, I'd probably stick with that. All these points here would be bolts. You could sleeve them if you wanted to, and then you could have holes here with a rod going through, because this section here, these two bottom ones would be wheels, and they would run in a channel. So if you can imagine a channel, two channels facing inwards, these wheels running in and out, much like the one you can purchase from the shop. And then you could put holes here with a rod going through. I'd probably do something a little bit more advanced than that. I'd probably put a gravity kind of just bar, a bit like what I've already got. The gravity always hold it down. So if you can imagine the bars running inside here like this, and it would be just sort of notched, something like that, which would always, no matter which position you have it in, it'll always just lock in place, so it could never fall down. That would be how I would do it. To answer that question of whether you should buy one or build one, if you ask me, I honestly think you should have a go at building one if you have the skills, if you have some tools and you can get some cheap materials. If you can't get those three things, or you don't have those three things, definitely go and purchase one. There's plenty out there that are good, and I gave you a bit of an understanding of which ones to look for, so hopefully that helps. And if you want to see the 3 videos of me sharing the process on how I built this thing, I'll leave those right here for you. It's actually the same time when this bike actually arrived in my garage for the first time.